I used to trust the sirens more than I trusted people. People lie when they're scared. They overreact, they freeze, they argue, they pretend everything's fine. The sirens never did any of that. When the sky turned the wrong color and the wind started stacking itself in layers, the horns did one clean thing. They told the whole county to stop pretending. That's why, when I first heard the second tone, I spent a full day trying to explain it like a professional. A motor bearing starting to go, a warped rotor, a loose panel singing under vibration, a relay chattering under load. Anything that lived in bolts and wiring and service life, anything I could name, document, and fix. Because the other explanation was humiliating. The other explanation was that the sound meant something. Not meaning in a poetic way. Meaning in the way a knock at your door means someone is out there. Meaning in the way your phone lighting up at 3 a.m. means the world has changed while you were asleep. I'm an emergency systems tech. I don't do seance candles or EVP recordings. I do procedure. I do preventative maintenance. I do predictable outcomes. But I'm telling you this because there's a kind of sound you can tuck under a warning signal that doesn't just hit your ears. It hits your choices. In Oklahoma County, the siren test isn't just a test. It's a ritual. People joke about it, sure. They roll their eyes. They post clips like it's a local tradition, the way outsiders post pictures of a big roadside statue. But even the jokers know the truth. The sound is a promise. When the real storm comes, the county will try to warn you in time. That promise only works if the ritual stays consistent. Same day, same time, same pattern. If you start playing with it, random tests, extra reassurance activations, you don't just annoy people. You teach them the sound is optional. You teach them it's noise. And when people stop listening, someone dies in a real storm. My name is Caleb Mercer, early 40s, County Emergency Management, Public Safety Communications side. Siren network, radio alert support, everything that's invisible until it fails. I have a county truck, a badge that gets me through gates, a phone that doesn't really stop ringing in storm season, and I have a flaw I didn't admit out loud until this started. I take failure personally. If the system fails, I don't think the system failed. I think I failed. Like it's a moral debt I owe the county. That guilt has made me do stupid things in the name of doing the right thing. Late night checks, solo visits, one more quick verification. The kind of choices you justify as responsibility when it's really compulsion wearing a uniform. The siren walker, yeah, people call it that now, knows how to use people like me. It doesn't have to chase you. It just has to give you a reason to step closer. The month it began, we'd already taken heat from a storm the week before. Not a total network failure, but inconsistent coverage, enough for a council member to smell blood. He wanted explanations. He wanted somebody's name attached to the problem. He wanted to stand at a podium and look like he'd found the leak in the boat. Numbers are supposed to be neutral. In my job, they aren't. They become weapons. Coverage reliability, response time, community confidence. Confidence was the one that worried me most. You can replace a battery. You can swap a control board. You can re-torque a mount. You can't reinstall trust once it's been ripped out of people. That morning, I was in the operations yard loading the truck. Cones, harness, hard hat, lockout tags, spare batteries. The kind of gear you don't notice until you don't have it, and then it's the last thing you think about right before you get hurt. My supervisor, Nora Beckett, called while I was checking the inventory list. Nora has the kind of voice that can steady a room full of panicked people. She's been doing this long enough that fear doesn't stick to her. Procedures do. "Caleb," she said, "you seeing the chatter?" "What chatter?" "Neighborhood groups," she replied. "People saying last month's test sounded wrong." I stopped with my hand on the truck bed. "Wrong how?" "They keep using the same phrase," she said. "A second sound, a low tone underneath." The words dried my throat in a way the weather didn't. You can get distortion, wind shear, power sag, two sirens overlapping and beating against each other like out-of-sync speakers. But underneath implies something layered, something deliberate, something that sits below the normal signal like a foundation. "Overlap," I said quickly. "Two sites slightly out of phase." Nora didn't argue. She didn't have to. The pause on the line told me she'd already walked through the same technical explanations and found them too thin. "Council wants reassurance," she said. "They're pushing for an extra run, a retest window." "No," I said too fast. I swallowed and tried again, calmer, professional. "Policy. We do the scheduled test. No extras unless there's confirmed failure. Extra activations teach people the sound doesn't matter." Nora exhaled. "Okay, I'll tell them." I should have stopped there. A responsible adult would have stopped there. But guilt doesn't stop. It changes clothes. After I hung up, I pulled up the siren map on the county tablet. Pins across the county like a constellation we built out of fear. One site on the outer ring caught my eye. S17. Near a high school football field where the suburbs thin into open land and power lines. Its service history was boring. Too clean. And too clean is what you see right before something breaks. At 11:58, I was in the comms room, staring at the live dashboard on a screen that was always a little too bright. I didn't read it like a report. I read it like a heartbeat. Quiet indicators, steady trends, everything waiting for noon. At exactly noon, the system flipped from idle to active. Even inside, you feel it. Pressure in your ears, a faint vibration in the building's bones. Like the county took one controlled breath. The status indicators changed across the map, each site acknowledging the command. Everything looked tidy, safe, managed. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Nora. Calls coming in. Weird tone. Multiple. I stared at the message long enough for the letters to blur. Outside the comms room window, the horizon shimmered with distance. People were probably on porches recording the test like they always did, half amused, half superstitious. The sirens wound down. For a few seconds, the world did that thing it always does after a loud sound. Everything feels too quiet, too empty. Like the air got scooped out. In that quiet, I realized something that made my stomach knot. My body was still reacting. My inner ear felt tapped, like someone had pressed a thumb against it. There was a pressure behind my eyes that didn't belong to silence. I opened the site details for S17 and tried to calm myself with numbers. Battery trend looked normal. Motor load looked normal. Cabinet door status looked secure. Then I noticed something I would normally dismiss. A tiny secondary power draw during activation. Not enough to trigger an alarm, not enough to make a report. Just a small, clean blip that didn't match the usual profile. I leaned closer until the screen's pale glow reflected on my hands. The taste of copper hit my mouth again, sharp and metallic. Like adrenaline or old pennies. Behind me, the room's air conditioner clicked on. That click made me flinch, and in the flinch, I understood the real problem wasn't a tone. It was the fact that my body had reacted before my brain could explain why. That's how it starts, if you want my honest opinion. Not with a monster in daylight. With you, trained, procedure-minded you, suddenly unsure if you remember the rules correctly. By mid-afternoon, the non-emergency lines had stacked up with the same kind of call over and over. Not panic, not screaming, but that uneasy voice people get when they're trying to be reasonable about something that didn't feel reasonable. It wasn't louder, it was underneath. My kid said it hurt his teeth. I've lived here 15 years and it never sounded like that. A local meteorologist posted a clip and encouraged people to record their neighborhood sirens so they could compare. She thought she was helping. I wanted to reach through the screen and stop her because I could feel the shape of what that kind of attention creates. But at that point, I still didn't have proof. I had complaints, a tiny anomaly, and the kind of dread you can't file in a work order. Around 5, Nora called again. "Council's pushing hard," she said. "They want you on record. They want you to say it was normal." "It wasn't," I said, and surprised myself with how firm the words came out. There was a quiet beat. Nora's voice softened. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the pin for S17 on the map and felt that old itch, the one that pretends it's responsibility. "I'll check it after shift," I said. "Visual inspection, no activation, no climbing, just making sure there's no obvious tamper." "Caleb," Nora warned. "I'll be careful," I promised, and hated how automatic that sounded. Nora didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. She just said very quietly, "If you hear it again, don't chase it." I let out a short laugh that came out wrong. "Chase a tone?" "I'm serious," she replied. "People keep saying it makes them want to get closer." I looked down at my hands. They were steady. They looked like my hands, but my fingertips felt faintly numb, like I'd been holding a vibrating tool too long. "Okay," I said. "No chasing." When I hung up, I grabbed my keys and walked out to the truck. As I crossed the parking lot, I caught myself humming without realizing it. Not a tune I knew, just one low note. Underneath. Like something in me was already trying to remember the sound, so I could find it again. I told myself I was doing the responsible thing. That's the lie guilt loves the most. It sounds clean, it sounds adult, it sounds like a safety memo. But the truth was simpler. I couldn't stand not knowing. S17 sat at the edge of a small community park, near a service path that curved behind a line of trees. Beyond that, the land flattened out into the kind of open horizon that makes sirens feel necessary. The pole was tall enough to be seen and boring enough to be ignored. That evening, the sky was washed out blue, fading toward a bruised purple at the edges. The air smelled like sun-baked asphalt and dust. Somewhere far off, a baseball practice was ending. One last metallic crack of a bat, then a few scattered cheers, then quiet. I parked the county truck and walked the last stretch with my tool bag bumping my leg. The closer I got, the more I noticed something I couldn't put in a report. The area around the pole wasn't silent. The wind still moved the leaves, but the sound felt thinned out. Like the air around the siren didn't want to carry noise properly. I stopped a few feet short and looked up. The horn assembly was intact. No visible damage, no nests, no loose panels. Just a piece of infrastructure doing its job. At the base, the cabinet sat in the grass, painted the same dull color as 100 other cabinets I'd opened. County label, heavy lock, familiar seam. My heart refused to match the familiarity. I didn't touch it right away. I circled the pole first, scanning for disturbed dirt, scuff marks, anything that suggested someone had been messing with it. The ground looked undisturbed. The door seam looked tight. The lock looked seated. Then I opened the county tablet and pulled up the site status. I wasn't reading it like a list. I was looking for a contradiction, something I could point at later and say, "Here, this is why I'm not crazy." Battery looked normal. Motor trend looked normal. Acknowledgement looked green. Then the door status line did something it shouldn't have. It flicked, just for a heartbeat, from closed to open and back again. I blinked hard. The cabinet door in front of me hadn't moved. The lock was still in place. The seam was still flush. I told myself, sensor chatter, corroded contact, vibration. That's what professionals do. They reach for the simplest explanation before they reach for the scary one. I made my hands move. I knelt, set my bag down, and slid the key into the lock. The metal felt warm, warmer than the air, warmer than it should have after sunset. Not hot enough to burn, just warm enough to feel like it had been touched recently. The lock turned smoothly. That, of all things, bothered me. County locks never turn smoothly. They're honest in their stubbornness. They make you fight a little, like they're reminding you that access is a privilege. This one opened as if it wanted to be opened. I pulled the handle. The cabinet door swung outward without a squeak, quiet as a held breath. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance. Battery pack, control board, wiring runs tied the way we tie them, nothing obviously fried. Then I saw the status light. It should have been steady after an activation. Instead, it pulsed. Not fast, not like an alarm. Slow, patient, like a heartbeat you weren't supposed to hear. I leaned closer and the smell hit me. Old insulation, metal dust, and something faintly sweet, like overheated plastic that had gotten close to melting and decided to remember it instead. I didn't hear anything for the first second. Then it arrived. Not from the horn above, not from any speaker, not from anywhere a sound should come from. It came from the cabinet itself. So low my ears didn't catch it cleanly at first, more like pressure than noise. A hum underneath. The hair on my arms lifted in a wave. I jerked back hard enough to smack my shoulder against the cabinet door. The pain was sharp and clean, real, grounding. My first instinct was to slam the door shut and leave. Then my second instinct showed up wearing the uniform of responsibility. Identify the source, it said. Document it. Fix it. I pulled out my phone and started recording, aiming the camera into the cabinet. The screen showed a shaky view of wiring and boards. My breathing sounded too loud in the mic. "Okay," I muttered, mostly for myself. "Okay, let's just figure out what that is." That's what I said. What I meant was, please be something I can name. I checked the obvious things. I touched the battery casing with the back of my knuckles. No strong vibration. I ran my fingers along the harness insulation lightly. No heat, no fraying, nothing that matched the hum. The hum stayed anyway. It didn't get louder. It didn't change pitch. It simply existed, steady and patient, as if it had nothing else to do but wait for my attention. The status light pulsed again. And in that slow blink, a thought crossed my mind that didn't feel like mine. Open it wider. Let it breathe. My fingers tightened on the door edge. I froze. Cabinets don't need to breathe. I didn't have any technical reason to open it wider. It was already open. He stepped back 2 paces and forced myself to swallow. My mouth tasted like copper again. I tried to anchor in procedure. I clipped my multimeter leads and checked voltage. Normal. I checked for ground faults. Normal. I checked the door sensor contacts. Clean. Then the tablet in my hand updated again. The door status flicked. Open. Closed. Open. Closed. Not random. In time with the pulse of the status light. In time with the hum. I stared until my eyes stung, and then my stomach dropped because the pattern was too clean for a glitch. It wasn't failing in a sloppy way. It was practicing. Like the system was rehearsing the idea of a door opening and closing without moving the door at all. I stepped back so far my boots hit the edge of the service path. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A call from Nora. I answered too fast. "Yeah?" "Where are you?" she asked. "At S17. Nora paused, and in that pause I heard something under her calm. Real tension. "Caleb, I just got an email forwarded from Public Works. Residents sent a recording. They swear they heard the siren again, today, after the test ended." "That's impossible," I said automatically. Nora didn't argue. She just said, "Calls show a spike at 12:17. Same complaint. It came back." 12:17. The number landed like a nail in my brain. "I'm hearing something here," I admitted. "What kind of something?" Nora asked, voice sharpened. I didn't want to say it. Saying it felt like giving it a name. "It's a low tone," I said. "In the cabinet. Under the system." Nora didn't hesitate. "Stop touching it. Close it. Lock it. Get in the truck." "Nora, I'm fine." "I can handle Caleb," she cut in, and her voice went hard. "You're not hearing me. Leave. Right now." I put my hand on the cabinet door and tried to swing it closed. As it moved, the hum shifted. Not louder, but closer, as if it had moved from the cabinet into my skull. My phone camera glitched for a heartbeat. The image pixelated, then steadied. In that tiny glitch, I saw something in the screen that I hadn't seen with my own eyes. A dark shape reflected in the cabinet's metal backplate. Tall. Too tall. My body spun before my brain could decide. Neck strained, breath caught. There was nothing there. The park was empty. The path ran back to my truck. The trees swayed. The sky deepened toward night. Nothing. But when I looked back at the cabinet, the reflection was gone. "Nora," I said, and my voice came out thin. "I'm closing it." "Good," she said, tight. "And don't look back." I latched the door. The click sounded too loud. I locked it once, then again because my fingers slipped. I grabbed my tool bag and walked fast back to the truck, forcing myself not to run. Running would have admitted fear, but my legs wanted to. I got inside, slammed the door, and sat there breathing like I'd sprinted. I started the engine and pulled away. I told myself the cabinet was locked, the site was secured, procedure had been followed. Then I glanced once in the rearview mirror. The siren pole shrank into the distance, and for a second, just a second, the cabinet door seam looked wrong. Not wide open, not dramatic, just not perfectly closed, like it had cracked an inch. Like something inside had learned how to make a door pretend. I looked forward and drove, and the whole way home, underneath the sound of tires on pavement and the engine's steady hum, I could still feel it. That second tone, not in the air, in my teeth. By 9 a.m., The county building felt like a hive someone had knocked sideways. Not loud, just restless. Phones rang with that clipped urgency people use when they don't want to sound afraid. Printers spat paper. Fluorescent lights buzzed in a way my brain had never cared about before yesterday. I sat at my desk with a coffee I hadn't touched, staring at the siren dashboard like it might blink first. S-17 had flagged a door event overnight. That, on its own, wasn't a crisis. Door sensors throw false positives. Contacts chatter. Wind shakes cabinets. Normally, you log it, roll a two-person crew, and move on. But this wasn't just door opened. The system had attached words to it. Not codes, not a sensor label, a sentence. I'd seen it on my phone last night. One clean line like a whisper in a place that should have been clinical. And the worst part wasn't the creepiness. The worst part was how calm the system sounded, like it was simply stating a fact about me. I tried to use evidence to calm myself down. I opened the video I'd recorded inside the cabinet. The clip played fine at first. Wires, boards, my breathing, the slow pulse of that status light. Then the audio cut out. Clean, sharp silence. No crackle, no compression artifacts, no bad mic noise. Just gone. The image kept going. My mouth moved, my hand reached in, the light pulsed, but the hum wasn't there. It was like the sound refused to be captured, or like it understood the difference between a witness and proof. Nora called before I could talk myself into another explanation. "You in?" she asked. "Yeah." "Council's pushing again," she said. "They want a public reassurance validation today, an unscheduled run." 24-hour cooldown, I replied automatically, like a line I'd memorized for a storm I didn't fully believe in yet. "They don't care," Nora said. "They care about optics." My throat tightened. "They can't force an activation." "They can force you," Nora replied. "They want a report. They want you to say the tone was normal." I stared at the map pins across the county. Each one was a promise we made to strangers. If the sky tries to kill you, we'll try to warn you. "I'm not signing that," I said. Nora didn't sound relieved. She sounded more worried. "Then they'll bring in a contractor," she said. "Or they'll make a show of you being uncooperative. Either way, a retest happens." "And they'll pick S-17, I said. Nora didn't deny it. "Complaints cluster there. They want a clean clip they can post." My stomach nodded. A clean clip. Proof. Reassurance. That's what you feed a system that wants attention. "Okay," I said, and heard my voice go flat. "If they're doing it, we control the environment. Two-person crew, daylight, no improvising." Nora exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. "Good." Then she added, softer, "And Caleb, if you feel yourself wanting to do something you can't explain, you tell me. Out loud." My mouth was dry. "Okay." When I hung up, I realized my hands were trembling. Not from caffeine, not from lack of sleep. From the fact that a part of me kept thinking about the cabinet like a conversation that hadn't finished. By noon, the pressure had a face. A council aide showed up with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't say retest. She used softer words, the kind that make a bad idea sound reasonable. Validation, she called it. Community reassurance. We need to quiet the narrative. Nora stepped between her and my desk, all calm professionalism. Policy says no unscheduled activations unless there's confirmed failure, she said. Extra runs degrade trust. The aide nodded as if that was interesting trivia. We're going to authorize a single controlled run, she said. 15 seconds, enough to confirm tone, short enough to avoid panic. That detail, 15 seconds, was the first thing that sounded like it came from someone who'd actually thought about consequences. Nora didn't flinch. Then you schedule it through emergency management with comms oversight. 2-person crew on site, full safety checklist. If you bypass process and something goes wrong, that liability is yours. The aide's smile tightened. I'll relay that. She left. When the door closed, the room felt colder, like her words had removed a layer of insulation. Nora looked at me. They're going to do it, she said, with or without us. Then we go, I replied. It was the professional choice. It was also the trap, because going meant proximity, and proximity had already proven it could change my mind. At S17, daylight made everything look harmless. No storm, no wind worth mentioning, just open sky and a pole standing in grass like it had always belonged there. 2 council staffers hovered near the service path with their phones out, eager to record a clean, all good clip. Nora set boundaries immediately. Stay back from the cabinet, she told them. Do not touch anything. Do not approach the pole. They nodded like people agreeing to a rule they didn't respect yet. I checked the cabinet lock. It was engaged. The seam looked flush. Still, when I put my palm to the metal, I felt that same wrong warmth, subtle, persistent, like the cabinet had been waiting. Nora caught my eye. You good? She asked. I wanted to lie. I don't like being here, I said instead. That makes 2 of us, she replied. She opened her tablet and pulled up live status. Her eyes moved across the indicators with that quiet, practiced speed that says she knows what normal feels like. Her jaw tightened. You see it, I murmured. I see a trend that shouldn't be there, she said. Small secondary draw, and the door sensor is tapping. The way she said tapping made my stomach turn. Not glitching, not chattering. Tapping, like a knock. A council staffer stepped closer, impatient. Are we doing this or not? Nora's voice sharpened. Back up. He hesitated, then obeyed. Nora's finger hovered over the activation control. 15 seconds, she said, more to herself than to anyone else. 15 seconds, I echoed. She started the activation. The horn spun up, the familiar wail climbing into the air like a blade. For 2 seconds, it was normal. Then the second tone arrived. It didn't sit on top of the sound like a harmony. It sat underneath it like a foundation, low pressure that didn't feel like it belonged to physics. My vision sharpened at the edges, like the world had decided to become too detailed. One council staffer stopped recording and frowned, his mouth tightening as if his teeth suddenly hurt. The other rubbed his jaw without realizing he was doing it. Nora's eyes widened a fraction. Okay, she said, and her voice came out strained. Okay, that's... The second tone shifted. Not louder, not faster. Closer. Like it moved from the air into the space behind my eyes. I felt my feet want to step forward, curiosity turning into obligation, the clean conviction that there was something I needed to do at the cabinet. My hand rose without permission. Nora grabbed my wrist hard. The pain snapped clean through me, and it saved me. Caleb, she hissed, look at me. I did. Her pupils were wide, Her face had gone pale. She was fighting the same pull. "Don't," she whispered. The siren continued. 15 seconds should have been almost over, but time felt wrong, like the note had stretched and held us in place. Nora stabbed the stop control. The siren wound down. The normal sound faded. The second tone didn't. It lingered in the space where silence should have been. Thin, patient, present. Then we heard a soft click from inside the cabinet. Not the door moving, not the lock turning. Just a small mechanical confirmation, like a relay engaging. Nora and I both looked down at the cabinet at the same time. The seam shifted, just a hair. As if that 15-second run hadn't been a demonstration at all, but a handshake. After the retest, the council staffers didn't linger. That was the first honest thing they did all day. They got their clip, or thought they had, and left fast, phones in pockets, eyes a little too careful, bodies moving with the stiff hurry people use when they're trying not to admit they were afraid. The official story started forming before the siren site was even out of view. Brief validation. No confirmed malfunction. Public concern taken seriously. The kind of language that smooths the edges off a bad memory until it can pass as policy. But all I could think about was the way the cabinet seam had shifted after the run. Not wide, not dramatic, just enough to feel like a response. Like we hadn't tested it. Like it had tested us. Back at the county building, the fluorescent lights felt too white. The comms room was cool, orderly, over-monitored. The kind of room designed to make you believe that if something goes wrong, a screen will tell you in time. Nora closed the door behind us and said, "No more field visits tonight." That wasn't a suggestion. It was a command, and I was grateful for it. I set my bag down beside the console and replayed the clip from S-17. The video showed exactly what I remembered. The pole, the cabinet, the staffers hanging back, Nora at the tablet, my hand twitching before she caught my wrist. The siren wound up. My face tightened. The council guy rubbed his jaw. The seam shifted. Everything was there. Everything except the sound. When the moment came, the moment the second tone should have entered, should have pressed into the recording, should have existed as proof, the audio flattened into a clean, dead layer. No distortion, no clipping, no artifact. Just absence. I replayed it 3 times anyway. The same result. The world in motion, the people reacting, the evidence of a thing that had happened, and a perfect silence where the worst part should have been. Nora leaned one hand on the back of a chair and watched the screen without blinking. Finally, she said quietly, "It doesn't want to become evidence." I looked at her. Her face had that tight, procedural stillness she gets when emotion has been forced into a smaller room and locked there. "It wants witnesses," she finished. I wanted to argue with that, not because it sounded wrong, because it sounded right in a way I didn't have a technical defense against. I scrubbed backward in the clip and froze on the frame where the cabinet seam shifted. "Could be heat expansion," I said. "Could be latch tension." "Could be," Nora replied. She didn't say no. She didn't say yes. She just let the weak explanations stand there long enough to show me they couldn't stand on their own. A few seconds later, she opened the incident channel and started drafting the driest possible internal note. "Unscheduled activation terminated. Anomalous public complaints continue. Field observations inconclusive pending further review." No mythology, no speculation, No language that could teach anyone what to listen for. That was the part I understood better after S17. Once people had a frame, they started building the thing for it. One phrase in the wrong report, one suggestive interview, one counsel aide trying to quiet the narrative. The question becomes the door. And this thing was interested in doors. Nora froze all discretionary activations before she left the room. No reassurance runs, no confidence demos, no cleanup tests for council optics. Just emergency-only authorization until further notice. She didn't ask permission. She used the kind of voice people don't argue with when they still think the system belongs to them. While she worked, I sat there with my jaw aching and my eyes burning from lack of sleep, trying not to think about the fact that we were both pretending screens still meant control. When she finished, she looked at me and said, "You're going home." "I can stay." "No," she said. "You can go home, lock the doors, and not try to solve anything tonight." I tried a thin smile. "That an order?" "That's me trying to keep you from doing something stupid and calling it responsibility." I should have had a better answer than that. Instead, I nodded. As I stood to leave, she added, softer, "I heard it too." That stopped me. I turned back. Nora almost never volunteers fear. She catalogs it, sorts it, puts it where it belongs. But now she was looking at the floor instead of at me. "In the building," she said. "After we got back. Faint. Under the HVAC. Under the lights." She finally met my eyes. "I'm telling you because if it follows routine, then silence won't stop it." The words settled low in my chest, not because they were dramatic, because they sounded like procedure trying to describe a haunting without giving it 1 ounce more language than necessary. "I won't go back out," I said. Nora held my gaze for a beat, as if weighing whether she believed me. Then she nodded once. "Good," she said. "Go sleep badly somewhere else." The drive home should have calmed me. It usually did. A road at night gives your brain one simple task: follow the lines, obey the lights, get where you're going. But the whole trip felt like I was arriving somewhere before I got there. Every traffic signal took too long. Every red light held just long enough for me to become aware of the inside of my own mouth, the way my teeth met, the faint pressure behind my eyes. I turned the radio off after 5 minutes because every voice sounded like it was speaking through too much air. When I pulled into my driveway, the neighborhood looked painfully normal. Porch lights, a dog barking 2 houses down, the shape of my own windows dark and familiar. Home should have meant boundary. Instead, before I even cut the engine, I felt it. Not heard, felt. That low, patient wrongness from S17. Not out in the night air, but waiting somewhere past my front door. I sat in the truck with both hands on the steering wheel and said, out loud, "No." The word fogged the windshield slightly. That helped. The ordinariness of it. My own breath. My own truck. Then I grabbed my keys and got out. I did what I would tell any resident to do. Verify. Secure. Don't improvise. I checked the porch first, then the windows, then the front lock. Nothing forced, nothing broken. No sign anyone had been in the house. When I opened the door, the smell hit me first. Dry wood, old coffee grounds, the faint detergent scent from laundry I hadn't folded. Home smells. Proof of a life that belonged to me before this started. I stepped inside and kept the lights off for 1 second longer than necessary. That was enough. The tone wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside my house. I turned the hallway light on. Nothing moved. Shoes by the wall, mail on the little side table, my jacket where I'd left it that morning. The tone wasn't audible in the usual sense. If someone else had been standing beside me, I couldn't have told you what to point them toward. But my body recognized it immediately. The same pressure behind the teeth, the same subtle sense that a sound was being felt before it was heard. I locked the door again even though I'd already locked it. Then I stood still and listened. The refrigerator compressor kicked on in the kitchen. An air vent clicked. Somewhere outside, a car door shut. All normal. All of it sitting on top of that other thing like furniture placed over a crack in the floor. I set my keys down too carefully and opened my tool bag. I had a small sound meter in there. Not fancy. Good enough for field checks, HVAC complaints, anything practical and boring. That was what I wanted. A practical, boring answer. I powered it on and held it chest high in the hallway. The reading moved with the house sounds. Low ambient, nothing special. I walked 2 steps toward the kitchen. Same. 2 steps back toward the living room. Same. I told myself that was good news. No measurable source, no actual sound, no reportable anomaly. Then I realized I wasn't really checking levels anymore. I was angling the meter slightly, rotating it, tilting my own head to match whatever the pressure in the room seemed to want. Like I could find the right orientation and the house would line up around it. I wasn't measuring. I was trying to align. The understanding hit me with a sharp pulse of nausea. I lowered the meter so fast I nearly dropped it. In the silence after that movement, I noticed something I hadn't seen when I came in. The smoke detector at the end of the hall had a tiny status LED. I'd lived there 3 years and never once cared how often it blinked. Now I watched it. Once. Dark. Once. Dark. Slow. Patient. The same tempo as the status light in the cabinet. I stood there staring until my shoulders started to ache. Then I laughed once, quietly, without humor, because the alternative was admitting that something had crossed a line I didn't know how to defend. The house wasn't haunted. That word was too theatrical, too easy. This was worse. This was mimicry. A household object keeping time with a thing it should never have met. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound punched straight through me. I took it out and looked. No sender name, no app banner. Just a lock screen notification sitting there like it had always belonged on the device. You brought it home. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then I tapped it awake again to prove I hadn't imagined it. The message was still there. No preview source, no call out to dispatch, county systems, or weather services. Just those 4 words. You brought it home. I should have screenshotted immediately, should have documented the timestamp, preserved the device state, done all the clean little professional things I've trained myself to do under pressure. Instead, I just stood there with the phone in my hand and felt accusations settle into me like cold water. Not because the line was supernatural, because it was true in the only way that mattered. I had gone back. I had opened the cabinet. I had kept following procedure long after procedure had stopped being neutral. And whether or not something literally traveled with me, I had carried the pattern into my own space by refusing to let go of it. I backed into the kitchen because it was the brightest room in the house, and I wanted brightness to mean something. I turned on every overhead light. I checked the back door lock. I opened a cabinet, then another, then the pantry, like a child proving monsters prefer closets. Nothing. No movement. No shape. No intruder waiting where intruders wait in sensible stories. The fear didn't lessen. It just got more embarrassed. That was part of what made it unbearable. There was no correct posture for it. no obvious source to confront, no clean line between reasonable caution and the kind of behavior that teaches a thing your habits. My phone buzzed again. I flinched so hard it hit the counter edge. This time the screen was blank when I looked. No notification, no missed call. Just my own reflection in the dark glass, pale and tired, and not yet strange enough to count as someone else. I set the phone face down, then immediately regretted doing that because I remembered Nora's voice at S17. That phone isn't yours right now. It's a mouth. I turned it over again and locked it manually. The screen went black. The smoke detector blinked at the end of the hall. Once. Dark. Once. Dark. Every blink felt less like a device check and more like a patient signal waiting for me to acknowledge the rhythm. The hallway light clicked off. Not all at once. Old switch lag, the tiny electrical delay that houses sometimes have before darkness finishes its job. But in that half-second of failing light, every nerve in my back tightened. I knew with absolute clarity that something in me wanted to turn around. Not because I'd heard movement, not because I'd seen a shadow, because the urge itself felt placed there, neat and deliberate, like a hand setting down a tool. I didn't turn around. The dark behind me felt crowded. My breathing got shallow. I kept my eyes on the kitchen counter, on the knife block, on the dish rack, on all the harmless things people stop seeing in their own homes because routine makes them invisible. The house stayed still. The smoke detector blinked again somewhere over my shoulder. And then the tone changed. Not louder, not closer in a way I could measure. Closer in the way a person is close when they step inside your reach. My skin went cold from the base of my neck down. I kept my head forward. I kept both hands flat against the counter because if I moved them, I was afraid I would break the one rule my body still understood. Don't turn around. The hallway behind me stayed dark. No footsteps, no breath, no scrape of fabric. Nothing a camera would respect. Just the unbearable certainty that the empty space at my back was no longer empty. That something had learned the dimensions of my house, the timing of my lights, the habits of my hands. And it felt so near, so precisely near, that if I'd leaned back even an inch, I might have made contact. I stood there until my legs shook, until my jaw hurt from clenching it. Until the kitchen lights started to feel unreal from how long I'd stared at them. And the whole time, it felt like someone had stepped into the space right behind my shoulder, close enough that if I breathed wrong, I'd touch it. I didn't turn around. Not because I was brave, not because I had some tactical understanding of what stood behind me. I stayed facing the counter because something in me knew, with the ugly certainty of instinct, that confirmation would change what came next. Seeing it would become participation. Naming it would become invitation. And if I let my body complete the turn it wanted so badly to complete, I wasn't sure I'd still be choosing anything at all. My hands stayed flat against the counter until the muscles in my forearms started to tremble. The kitchen lights buzzed faintly overhead. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice and stopped. Ordinary sounds, house sounds, the kind that should have anchored me. Instead, they just made the other thing more precise. Like the second tone wasn't replacing the world, it was waiting underneath it, patient enough to let the world keep talking while it learned my timing. I swallowed and forced myself to breathe once through my nose. The air smelled like dish soap, stale coffee, and the faint heat of the overhead bulbs. I said, quietly, to the counter in front of me, "I'm not turning around." The sentence sounded thin, too much like a person negotiating with an empty room. So I tried again, firmer. "I'm leaving." That mattered more. It felt less like fear and more like choice. Something in me, some procedural, stubborn corner of me that still believed words could set boundaries, grabbed onto that and held. Say it out loud. Name your choice. That thought came cleanly, almost like memory, and I hated how helpful it felt. I didn't know whether it was my own brain clawing for control, or whether I was repeating a rule I hadn't realized I'd already learned. Maybe there wasn't a difference anymore. My phone buzzed again on the counter. The sound knifed through the room so sharply I nearly turned on reflex. I looked down instead. The screen glowed against the laminate. No app banner, no sender, no explanation. Just 4 words. You already did. My mouth went dry. For a second, I didn't understand it. Then I did, and that was worse. Not turning around wasn't the first choice. Going to S17 had been a choice. Opening the cabinet had been a choice. Watching, recording, following, letting responsibility dress itself up as virtue, that had all been choosing. The line on the screen didn't feel supernatural. It felt accusatory in the way a true sentence does when you've been carefully avoiding it. I picked up the phone and my hand shook hard enough to blur the text. When I blinked, the notification was gone. No trace in recent alerts, no message thread, nothing to screenshot, nothing to preserve. Just my own face reflected in the glass again, pale and drawn, and not quite trusting the angle of my own features. I locked the phone and slid it into my pocket like I was bagging contaminated evidence. Then I did the smart thing, the adult thing. I left. I didn't go down the hallway. I didn't check the bedrooms. I didn't test whether the feeling followed when I moved closer to the dark. I backed away from the counter, keeping my face toward the kitchen until I reached the front door. My keys slipped once in my hand. The deadbolt took too long. Every second of fumbling felt instructional, like the house was being shown exactly where my habits broke down under pressure. But then the lock opened. The door swung. Night air hit my face, and I stepped outside without ever giving the hallway behind me the turn it wanted. I got back in the truck and sat there with both doors locked and the engine off. My heart pounded hard enough to make the seatbelt clip tap lightly against the pillar. Inside the house, nothing moved visibly. No lights changed. No silhouette crossed a window. No clear, cinematic proof arrived to reward terror. That almost made it worse. If something had pressed its hand to the glass, I could have filed it under danger. But what I had instead was absence shaped like intent. A home I no longer trusted, still pretending to be a home. I started the engine and drove back toward the county building because there are only so many places a man like me goes when his own house stops feeling neutral. Work. Infrastructure. Rooms with fluorescent lights and keycard access and rules written down in binders. Places that tell you systems can still be understood if you stand close enough to the right screens. Nora met me at the secure entrance without asking why I'd come back. One look at my face told her enough. She stepped aside, let me in, and locked the door behind us. "You left?" she asked as we walked. "Yes." "Good." That answer hit harder than comfort would have. We moved through the quiet hallway toward comms, our shoes too loud on the floor. The building had emptied down into its late-night version of itself. Air handlers, server noise, distant vending machine hum. Ordinary infrastructure music. I should have felt safer there. Instead, the whole place felt like a larger house with better wiring. Inside the comms room, the screens painted the walls in cold light. Nora handed me a paper cup of coffee that tasted like burnt paper and survival. I took 2 swallows anyway. Then I told her. Not all of it in order, not gracefully. Just the facts as cleanly as I could keep them. The feeling at the front door, the hallway pressure, the smoke detector blink keeping the cabinet's rhythm, the lock screen message, the certainty behind me in the kitchen. I didn't embellish. I didn't try to sell her on fear. I just said what happened. Nora listened with her arms folded tight. When I finished, she stared at the advisory console for a long moment and said, "It used the notification channel." That sentence landed heavier than the one on my phone. "It shouldn't be able to," I said. "No," Nora replied. "It shouldn't." Her voice stayed calm. That was how she handled things she hated most, by compressing reaction until it sounded almost clinical. She sat down at the adjacent terminal and started pulling access logs, alert histories, dispatch handoffs, weather service relays. Her eyes moved fast, checking each system with the flat patience of someone trying to find the exact place reality had been replaced. "It's either inside the backbone," she said quietly, "or it's good at pretending it is." I didn't answer, because both options were bad, and one of them felt worse only because I understood it less. Nora opened the advisory panel next. The county uses templates for warning text, plain language, carefully reviewed, built to reduce panic instead of feeding it. She pulled up the most recent draft and froze with her hand on the mouse. "What?" I asked. She didn't move. Then she angled the screen toward me. The draft text on the panel wasn't what she'd typed. The template header was intact. The timestamp was intact. The author field still carried her credentials, but the body had changed. Not a glitch of missing letters or corrupted symbols. A sentence. "Don't warn them." Neither of us spoke for a second. The cursor blinked at the end of the line like it was waiting to see what we'd do with it. Nora put both hands flat on the desk, leaning in without touching the keyboard. "I don't want to put the wrong words into the system," she said. It was one of the most controlled sentences I'd ever heard her speak. Not fear, not exactly. Respect for contamination. She reached for the mouse. The screen changed before she clicked. A second line appeared beneath the first. "Because they'll learn the rules." My scalp prickled. That was the first time it stopped feeling like a haunting and started feeling like instruction. Not to us, about us. A statement of strategy. A thing explaining itself in the only language it had ever really cared about. Behavior. Nora let out one careful breath through her nose. Then, to the screen, she said very softly, "Fine." I looked at her. She didn't look away from the text. "You don't want warning language public," she said. "I understand that." Her voice was steady, almost diplomatic, and hearing her negotiate with a monitor made something cold settle into the bottom of my stomach. The cursor blinked once, twice. Then the sentence changed again. "Because they'll learn the rules" stayed on screen. Nothing else moved. No typing indicator, no flicker, no sound. Just the same line, holding. Nora's jaw tightened. "That's not a conversation," she said. "No," I answered. "It's a policy statement." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out too fast. The Notes app was open. I hadn't touched it. The note title was simple. Procedures. At first I thought it was one of mine, some old field checklist, some draft I'd forgotten. Then I read the first line. Rule 1. If you hear it under the signal, do not move toward the cabinet. The second line sat beneath it. Rule 2. If it speaks through a device, do not answer with curiosity. My thumb hovered over the screen. More lines followed. Rule 3, Rule 4, Rule 5. Each one written in the clipped, almost practical cadence of emergency guidance. Not dramatic, not occult, just procedures. Household language for surviving a system problem. And that was what made my stomach turn. Because as I read them, they felt familiar in my bones. Not like I agreed with them, like I'd already been obeying them badly. Nora stepped closer, reading over my shoulder. "Did you write this?" she asked. No. The answer came fast, too fast, because I couldn't prove it. We read in silence. Rule 1. If you hear it under the signal, do not move toward the cabinet. Rule 2. If it speaks through a device, do not answer with curiosity. Rule 3. If the room goes still, name your choice out loud. Rule 4. If someone sounds calm when they should be afraid, pull them back before they finish listening. Rule 5. If you leave, do not return alone. Then the last line. Rule 6. If you see it in a reflection, do not look twice. My skin went cold. The dark cabinet backplate, the shape in the phone screen, the hallway glass at home. All of it snapped into one line of meaning so hard it almost hurt. I looked instinctively toward the dead monitor in the corner of comms, the one that had been powered down for weeks but still caught room light on its black surface. For half a second, my brain wanted to check, to verify, to see whether there was anything in it besides us. Nora's hand closed around my wrist before I moved. Not hard this time, just enough. "Don't," she said. I didn't, but the urge itself was instructive. That was the part I couldn't stop feeling. The rules weren't just defensive. They described a thing that had already spent days teaching us where our instincts broke, what not to do, how it entered, which ordinary reflexes turned into doorways. It wasn't calling people to shelter. It wasn't even calling them closer in the obvious way I'd first imagined. It was calling them to participate, to test, to verify, to help, to authorize one more run because a system needed reassurance, to look again because maybe the first glance had been mistaken, to answer a message because maybe it came from a real channel, to stay calm, to stand where it told you. To take one more step in the name of responsibility and call it professionalism while you did it. I lowered the phone slowly. The note stayed open. No sender, no sync source, no audit trail. Just those rules, sitting on my screen like something I might have typed at 2 a.m. after a bad shift and forgotten. That was the worst part. Not that the rules existed, that they were plausible, that if someone handed me that list without context, I might have believed it came from me. Nora released my wrist and stepped back. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked not confused, not frightened, angry in a tired, precise way. "We contain it," she said. The sentence didn't sound heroic. It sounded like a workload. Like something ugly had just been added to the county, and now it belonged to us because nobody else knew its name. I nodded. Because what else do you do when the system you maintain becomes the root of infection? Nora looked at the county map. One pin pulsed on the outer ring, S17. Steady. Waiting. "Do we tell anyone?" I asked. She was quiet for a long second, then, "Not like this." She glanced at my phone again, at the list, at the advisory screen still holding the line about rules. "If we start describing it wrong, we teach it." That was the trap. Silence protected people for a little while. Speech might protect them too late. And somewhere between those two facts sat every bad decision we were about to make. I locked the phone and put it face down. The room stayed still. No new message, no system chime, no dramatic sign that it had heard us. Just the low electric hush of the building doing exactly what it was built to do. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst threshold had already been crossed. Not because it was in the sirens now, not because it was in the phones or the advisory panel or the house, because it had begun to sound like procedure. Like the kind of thing a tired man might write for himself and mistake for control. And somewhere beneath all of it, beneath the room noise, beneath the HVAC, beneath the hum of county infrastructure trying to impersonate order, I could feel that second tone holding steady, almost pleased. Not loud, not hungry, just certain. Like it already knew which rule guilt would make me break next. Nora made coffee that tasted like burnt paper and survival. We sat in the comms room long past midnight, not talking much, because talking felt like giving the thing more language to work with. Every time one of us shifted in our chair, the second tone seemed to shift with us. Never louder, never obvious, just present enough to keep our muscles tight. I kept thinking about the number that had been hiding in plain sight. 1217. Nora had said it on the phone yesterday like it was just a timestamp in a call report. But the more I replayed the last 2 days, the more that number returned like a refrain. The siren test ends at noon, and at 12:17, people swear the sound comes back. Door sensors tap. Tiny power draws show up where they shouldn't. Not enough to trigger alarms, just enough to exist, quiet, consistent, patient. Nora didn't bring it up first. She waited, like she didn't want to plant the idea in my head. "I think it isn't random," I said finally, voice low. Nora's eyes stayed on the big screen. "What isn't?" "The after," I said. "The return. It keeps clustering around 17 minutes after." Nora didn't answer right away. She pulled up a wider timeline, weeks, not hours. She wasn't reading lines. She was looking for shape, like weather radar. Fronts, bands, repeating patterns. Then she nodded once, slow. 17 minutes, she said. After every scheduled activation, even on quiet months, even when nobody complained. My mouth went dry. So it's been here longer. Nora didn't deny it. She just zoomed the view out further, and the realization thickened in the room like humidity. "Do you know why 17 minutes matters?" she asked. I shook my head. "It's long enough for people to relax," she said. "Long enough to go back inside. Long enough to decide the ritual is over and the day is normal again." I felt the second tone settle under her words, like it approved of the explanation. "It waits until trust drops its guard," I said. Nora looked at me. Her eyes were too awake for the hour. "It waits until attention thins," she corrected. "That's when people get careless. That's when they get curious." We sat with that for a moment, the building's fluorescent hum and the second tone weaving together until I couldn't tell which one made my teeth ache. Then Nora pushed her chair back and stood. "Okay," she said, voice tight. "We stop feeding it. We also stop pretending ignorance is protection." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means we don't go out there like idiots," she replied. "But we don't leave the network blind either. If this is a window, we can watch it without touching it." My skin prickled. "Watch how?" Nora pointed to the equipment rack. Passive monitoring, clean capture, no commands, no pings, no remote tests. We just listened to the network traffic and power trends during that window. Like a stakeout, I muttered. Like a storm watch, she corrected. You don't chase the tornado. You watch the conditions that make one. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say we were being pulled into the game. But we were already in it. The only question was whether we stayed blind. Okay, I said. Passive only. Nora nodded sharply. Passive only. And then, like the building had been waiting for those words, one of the monitors blinked off for a heartbeat and came back. Not a power flicker, not a surge, a clean blink, like an eye closing. The second tone didn't change. My stomach did. Morning came in thin layers of exhaustion. Nora pushed an internal freeze through the chain of command. No unscheduled retests, no solo checks, no public reassurance activations. She wrote it in careful language, the kind that sounds like policy and not fear. On paper, it held. In practice, council hated it. They wanted something visible, something they could point to on camera and say, "See, they fixed it." But Nora didn't bend. And because she didn't bend, the thing had to change tactics. If it couldn't use council pressure as a hand on the lever, it would use something older. Curiosity. Just before noon, Nora's phone rang. She listened for 20 seconds, then her face drained. She put the call on speaker. A field supervisor's voice came through, annoyed and confused. "We've got a contractor at S17, he said. "Not ours. Private outfit. Says council hired them for an independent inspection." Nora's hand tightened around the phone. "They're not authorized." "I told them," the supervisor snapped. "They don't care. They're already on site." My throat went tight. "Two-person crew?" "Yeah," he said. "2 guys, bucket truck. They're not climbing yet. They're checking the cabinet." Nora and I exchanged a look that was both argument and agreement. "Tell them to stop," Nora said. "I tried," the supervisor replied. "They said it's just a quick verification." Quick verification. Those words had a shape now. They weren't maintenance. They were participation. "Call the sheriff," Nora said. "No hesitation. If they won't leave." There was a beat of silence. "Law enforcement? For a cabinet check?" "Yes," Nora said, and her calm made it sound like a weather warning. "Now." The supervisor exhaled. "Fine." He hung up. Nora looked at me. "We can't physically stop them." "We can warn them," I said, then immediately hated how that sounded. Nora shook her head. "Not with specifics. If we hand them the rules, they'll treat it like a challenge." She was right, and I hated that too, because it meant we were forced to choose between silence and the risk of teaching the wrong lesson. At noon, the scheduled county-wide test ran. Routine. The ritual. We didn't trigger anything. We didn't touch S17. We just watched. The sirens activated across the map. Each site reported clean acknowledgements. Everything looked tidy, like the world wanted to pretend it could be managed. The test ended. The clock moved forward. 1 minute. 2. 5. The building's air conditioner cycled. Someone in the hallway laughed at a joke I couldn't hear. Normal life flexing its muscles. At 12:16, my palms started to sweat. Not because I was afraid, because my body remembered the window before my mind could justify it. At 12:17, the dashboard updated. Not with a big alarm, with something smaller. S17's door state flickered, open, closed, like a heartbeat tapping under glass. Nora leaned closer. "There," she whispered. On the power trend, a tiny secondary draw appeared, clean, intentional, like something had woken up and stretched. Then a notification slid onto Nora's screen. Not a code, not a sensor label, a sentence. The origin line read, S-17 cabinet. The description was, "They're listening." Nora's face went pale. "Contractors," I whispered. My phone buzzed a beat later. Same origin. The description was, "Don't interrupt." The words sat there, calm as a request. My chest tightened with anger. It thinks it can tell us what to do. Nora didn't look away from the screen. "It knows what guilt does to you," she said softly. Outside, somewhere across the county, two men were probably leaning over a cabinet, probably laughing, probably rolling their eyes at overcautious county staff, probably hearing something that felt strangely calming. Nora tried the field supervisor again. Voicemail. Again, voicemail. She tried the alternate line. Nothing. My stomach dropped. "Calls aren't going through," I said. Nora stared at the dashboard as if she could will a connection into existence. S17's door state began to tap faster. Still rhythmic, still patient. And then a new line appeared in the status panel, somewhere a normal system would have left blank. A sentence shaped like it was meant for me. The description was, "They're very close now." My mouth went numb, because I knew what it was asking. Not to open a cabinet, not to run a test. To choose whether we would act without proof, without permission, without the comfort of policy. To choose whether we would break our own rules to keep someone else from learning them the hard way. Underneath everything, the second tone waited, patient, certain, as if it already knew what guilt would make me do next. It was Nora who moved first, not dramatically, just the smallest shift. Chair back, jacket grabbed, mind made up before her body fully caught up. "We're going," she said. My throat tightened. If we go, that's what it wants. Nora looked at me with something raw and exhausted in her face. "And if we stay, two men learn the rules with their bodies." The second tone pressed at the base of my skull, heavy, deliberate. This was the choice it wanted, not between safety and danger, between guilt and guilt. I stood up so fast my chair rolled back into the console. "Keys," I said. Nora grabbed her radio. I took my phone and turned the screen face down before I put it in my pocket, like that mattered. We moved through the hallway like we were walking into weather, fast, focused, unwilling to look too far ahead. In the parking lot, the air felt wrong. Not cold, not hot, just charged, like the sky was holding electricity and pretending it wasn't. We drove with the radio on low. No unit updates yet. No confirmation that anyone else was moving faster than we were. I kept my eyes on the road until my phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look. I looked anyway because the pull wasn't just curiosity. It was the sick need to know what it wanted. The description was, "Don't rush." Rage flashed so sharp it made my eyes sting. "Tell me it's not in my head," I said, and my voice cracked. Nora kept her eyes on the road. "It's not," she said, "and don't read it out loud." "What if it's baiting us?" I whispered. "It is," Nora said, immediate. "So we don't bite. Minimum contact. Get them away." We turned off the main road toward the park. Half a mile out, we saw the bucket truck. It was parked wrong, angled across the service path like the driver had stopped in a hurry. The hazard lights weren't flashing. The engine sounded like it was idling too high, an anxious mechanical purr. 2 orange cones sat in the grass, but they were placed sloppy, tossed rather than set. That small lack of care tightened something in my chest. People don't place cones sloppy unless their attention has drifted somewhere else. Nora pulled up behind the truck and killed the engine. For a second, the world held its breath. Then I heard something that made my skin crawl more than silence ever could. A man laughing. Not scared, not nervous, light and amused, like he'd just been told a joke. It floated from the direction of the pole, and then it stopped mid-breath like someone had pinched the sound off. Nora and I got out and walked fast. The siren pole stood ahead in the grass, perfectly ordinary. The cabinet door was open. One contractor was on his knees in front of it, leaning in too close. His shoulders were tense, but not in fear, like he was trying to hold himself in a precise posture. The other stood behind him with his phone raised, recording with a grin that didn't belong in that quiet. "Hey," Nora called, voice sharp. "Step away from the cabinet, now." The standing contractor turned slowly. His eyes looked wrong, not glazed, not movie-possessed, focused too tightly, like his attention had narrowed down to one point and the rest of the world had become irrelevant. He smiled at Nora like she'd interrupted something pleasant. "You guys heard it too?" he asked. Nora stopped at a safe distance. She didn't approach the open door. She didn't let her feet cross that invisible boundary line. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "You're not authorized. Close it, lock it, walk back to your truck." The kneeling contractor didn't move. His head was still tilted toward the cabinet's mouth, like he was listening to a secret through metal. His lips moved as if he were repeating something under his breath. I couldn't hear the words, but I felt the second tone deepen inside my skull, matching the slow pulse I'd seen in the cabinet light, matching the tapping pattern on the dashboard. The standing contractor lowered his phone slightly, as if considering whether to obey. Then his expression brightened, like he'd been given permission. "It's like a voice," he said, delighted. "Not like words, more like it tells you where to stand. If you get the angle right, it gets clearer." Nora's face hardened. "Back away." He laughed, short and dismissive. "It's not scary," he said. "It's honestly kind of calming." My stomach lurched. Calming was the most dangerous word he could have used. Fear makes people run. Calm makes them stay. I became aware of my own feet, how they'd carried me forward without my permission. I was too close. Not cabinet close, but closer than I'd intended. Nora's hand clamped my wrist, hard. She didn't yank, she anchored. The standing contractor's gaze slid past us, toward the horn assembly above, like he was looking at a stage. His mouth opened slightly. And in that small change, I recognized the look. The moment curiosity becomes compulsion. He whispered, almost reverently, "If you give it a second run, it opens the rest." Nora's eyes widened. "No," she said, flat, final. But the contractor wasn't finished. "It wants the ritual," he said softly. Then, with the calm certainty that made my blood run cold, "It already has a schedule." Nora moved before I could think, fast, controlled. She snatched the phone out of the contractor's hand. He jolted. "Hey!" She didn't glance at the screen. She didn't argue. "That phone isn't yours right now," she said. "It's a mouth," and she threw it into the grass. The sound of plastic hitting dirt was stupidly normal. For one clean second, the second tone thinned. The contractor staggered back like he'd been slapped. The kneeling one didn't move. He leaned closer to the cabinet, not grabbing wires, not yanking anything, just slipping his fingers inside gently, like he was reaching toward warmth. Nora started forward, and the siren above us made a sound I'd only ever heard in maintenance bays. A relay click, a mechanical arming, the moment before a system commits. Trevor's head snapped up. "Did you do that?" Nora's face drained. "No." The park's ambient noise dulled. Road sound, birds, even the wind in the leaves, like someone had lowered the world's volume. Underneath it, the second tone sharpened into a thin, precise thread. The kneeling contractor's shoulders relaxed, like the sound had finally found its key. He whispered, "It's polite. It's waiting for permission." My stomach turned, because that was the real shape of it. Not force, not possession, an invitation. Nora's radio crackled again, this time with a single warped word shoving its way through the channel. "Closer." She made a decision. No argument, no warning speech, no pretending we still had time to explain this cleanly. She grabbed my wrist with both hands and yanked me backward, hard, away from the cabinet's line. "Move!" she barked. I stumbled, caught myself, and my gaze flicked, against my will, toward the cabinet's inner metal plate. In its dull surface, I saw us, Nora, me, the standing contractor. And behind the kneeling one, just outside the reflection's edge, a silhouette, like a person made of wrong angles, too tall for the space, standing as if it had always been there. My stomach dropped. Rule 6 screamed in my head, "Don't turn around." I didn't. I locked my eyes on Nora's face. She was pale, jaw clenched, pupils wide. She'd seen it too. The contractor backed away another step, suddenly breathing hard. What is that?" he whispered. The kneeling man smiled, still reaching, still listening. Above us, the siren motor began to spin, not the full wail yet, but the ominous prelude. The moment before the county's voice becomes a command. Nora leaned close to my ear, voice shaking with controlled urgency. "If it activates," she whispered, "we don't listen. We run. We don't look back." My throat tightened. What about him? Nora's eyes flicked to the kneeling man, and something in her face cracked, just a hair. Then she said the hardest sentence I'd ever heard her say. "We can't save someone who's already answering." The motor spun faster. The air pressed heavier. And I realized the most terrifying part wasn't the siren about to scream. It was the fact that the siren walker wasn't forcing anything. It was offering a ritual. A handshake. And people, good, curious, ordinary people, were choosing to take it. The worst part wasn't the voicemail. The worst part was how normal voicemail sounded while something not normal was clearly happening somewhere else. Nora kept dialing anyway, like persistence could brute force the world back into shape. Her thumb moved fast and practiced. The ringtone played. The call dropped into that clean, dead message tone. Again, again. I stood behind her, jaw clenched, feeling the second tone like a pressure band around my skull. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It sat under everything, patient as a habit. I should have been thinking like a technician. Alternate contacts, escalation chain, dispatch, law enforcement. Instead, my brain kept circling one sentence like it was written on the inside of my eyelids. 17 minutes is long enough to choose. It wasn't threatening us with violence. It was threatening us with responsibility. It was putting weight exactly where it knew we couldn't refuse it. Nora snapped her eyes up. "Sheriff," she said. I nodded too fast. "Call." She did. When someone finally answered, Nora's voice shifted into her emergency tone, calm, clipped, all procedure. "This is emergency management," she said. "We need a unit dispatched to S-17, Public Safety Infrastructure Site. Unauthorized contractors are accessing a restricted cabinet. I need immediate removal." There was a pause on the other end. Confusion, maybe irritation. Nora didn't raise her voice. She didn't beg. She simply made the situation sound non-negotiable. "I understand it sounds minor," she added. "It isn't." She listened, said a few more words, then hung up. "They're sending someone," she said. But the last words sounded thin, stretched over a timeline she didn't trust. I looked at the wall clock. 12:19. 2 minutes into the window, and I could already feel it. Like the air in the room had become more conductive. The second tone braided itself under the fluorescent buzz until my teeth ached. The dashboard updated again. Not a red alarm, not a panic banner. Small status changes at S-17. Door state taps, tiny power draws, micro acknowledgements. It looked like nothing. It felt like a knock. Nora leaned closer, scanning the panel the way you scan radar. Shape, timing, escalation. Then she went still. "What?" I asked. Her voice came out careful. "The cabinet is still reading closed, but the internal service latch, one that shouldn't trip unless the door is physically open, just registered." My throat tightened. "So it's open." "It can't be," Nora said automatically, then corrected, forcing the honest version out. "It shouldn't be." Those words were all we had left. Should and shouldn't. My phone buzzed again. Another notification slid down, neat and calm. The origin line read, S-17 cabinet. The description was, "They're very close now." I didn't read it aloud. I didn't want to give the sentence air. But Nora saw my face change and held out her hand, palm up, demanding. I passed her my phone. She read the line once, then again, as if repetition might reveal a hidden code. Then she did something that startled me. She turned her own phone face down on the desk, like cutting off eye contact, like refusing to let it speak through glass. "We're going," she said. My stomach dropped. "Nora, no," she snapped, and then forced her voice back down. "No solo. We go together. We do not open any cabinets. We do not listen. We pull them off-site and we leave." "That's still feeding it," I said, and I hated myself for how neat that excuse sounded. Nora looked at me with something raw in her eyes. "Caleb," she said quietly, "those are 2 people out there. You want to sit here and be correct while they learn the rules with their bodies?" The second tone pressed under my thoughts, heavy as a hand at the base of my skull. This was the choice it wanted, not between safety and danger, between guilt and guilt. I stood so fast my chair rolled back. "Keys," I said. Nora grabbed her jacket and radio. We moved through the hallway like we were walking into weather, fast, focused, unwilling to look too far ahead. In the parking lot, the air felt wrong. Not cold, not hot, just charged, like the sky was holding electricity and pretending it wasn't. We drove with the radio on low. No unit updates yet. No confirmation that anyone else was moving faster than we were. At 12:22, my phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look. I looked anyway because the pull wasn't just curiosity. It was the sick need to know what it wanted. The description was, "Don't rush." Rage flashed so sharp it made my eyes sting. "Tell me it's not in my head," I said, and my voice cracked. Nora kept her eyes on the road. "It's not," she said. "And don't read it out loud." "What if it's baiting us?" I whispered. "It is," Nora said, immediate. "So we don't bite. Minimum contact. Get them away." We turned off the main road toward the park. Half a mile out, we saw the bucket truck. It was parked wrong, angled across the service path like the driver had stopped in a hurry. The hazard lights weren't flashing. The engine sounded like it was idling too high, an anxious mechanical purr. 2 orange cones sat in the grass, but they were placed sloppy, tossed rather than set. That small lack of care tightened something in my chest. People don't place cones sloppy unless their attention has drifted somewhere else. Nora pulled up behind the truck and killed the engine. For a second, the world held its breath. Then I heard something that made my skin crawl more than silence ever could. A man laughing. Not scared, not nervous. Light and amused, like he'd just been told a joke. It floated from the direction of the pole, and then it stopped mid-breath, like someone had pinched the sound off. Nora and I got out and walked fast. The siren pole stood ahead in the grass, perfectly ordinary. The cabinet door was open. One contractor was on his knees in front of it, leaning in too close. His shoulders were tense, but not in fear, like he was trying to hold himself in a precise posture. The other stood behind him with his phone raised, recording with a grin that didn't belong in that quiet. "Hey," Nora called, voice sharp. "Step away from the cabinet. Now!" The standing contractor turned slowly. His eyes looked wrong. Not glazed, not movie-possessed, focused too tightly, like his attention had narrowed down to one point and the rest of the world had become irrelevant. He smiled at Nora like she'd interrupted something pleasant. "You guys heard it too?" he asked. Nora stopped at a safe distance. She didn't approach the open door. She didn't let her feet cross that invisible boundary line. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "You're not authorized. Close it, lock it, walk back to your truck." The kneeling contractor didn't move. His head was still tilted toward the cabinet's mouth, like he was listening to a secret through metal. His lips moved as if he were repeating something under his breath. I couldn't hear the words, but I felt the second tone deepen inside my skull, matching the slow pulse I'd seen in the cabinet light, matching the tapping pattern on the dashboard. The standing contractor lowered his phone slightly, as if considering whether to obey. Then his expression brightened, like he'd been given permission. "It's like a voice," he said, delighted. "Not like words, more like it tells you where to stand. If you get the angle right, it gets clearer." Nora's face hardened. "Back away." He laughed, short and dismissive. "It's not scary," he said. "It's honestly kind of calming." My stomach lurched. Calming was the most dangerous word he could have used. Fear makes people run. Calm makes them stay. I became aware of my own feet, how they'd carried me forward without my permission. I was too close. Not cabinet close, but closer than I'd intended. Nora's hand clamped my wrist, hard. She didn't yank, she anchored. The standing contractor's gaze slid past us toward the horn assembly above, like he was looking at a stage. His mouth opened slightly, and in that small change, I recognized the look. The moment curiosity becomes compulsion. He whispered, almost reverently, "It's telling me there's more, if we make it sing." Nora's eyes widened. "No," she said, flat, final. But the contractor's thumb moved on his phone screen, not dialing, not ending a recording, searching, tapping, like he already knew where the control would be. And behind us, somewhere in the infrastructure I'd spent my career maintaining, the second tone held steady, waiting for someone else to authorize the next test. "Nobody touches anything," Nora said, sharp enough to cut through the contractor's calm. "Not your phone, not the cabinet, not the pole." The standing guy blinked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. His thumb hovered anyway, drifting with that absent-minded certainty of someone about to press the same elevator button twice. The kneeling contractor still hadn't moved. He leaned toward the open cabinet like it was a mouth, and he was waiting for it to finish a sentence. I kept my feet planted and forced my eyes off the cabinet's inner plate. The reflection had teeth. I could feel it, like a hook trying to catch behind my ribs. "Hey," I called. Not loud, not threatening, just firm, the way you talk to someone near the edge of a roof. "What's your name?" The standing contractor looked at me as if I'd reminded him he was a person. "Trevor," he said. "Trevor," I repeated. "I'm Caleb, that's Nora. Listen, your partner needs to step back." Trevor's smile twitched. "He's fine, he's just listening," I finished for him. I kept my voice steady and boring. Fear would turn this into a dare. "That cabinet's energized. If something arcs, if something shifts, it's his face that takes it first." It was a true enough frame to keep him inside reality. I didn't mention tones. I didn't mention rules. I didn't feed the thing vocabulary. Nora shifted half a step sideways, opening space for retreat. Her hand stayed on my wrist, not pulling, just anchoring, like she could feel my mind sliding forward. Trevor hesitated. For a second, the human part of him won. Then the second tone deepened, not louder, but closer. Trevor's eyes drifted up toward the horn assembly, like he was looking at a stage. The kneeling contractor's lips moved again, a whisper I couldn't hear, a repetition that didn't feel self-generated. Nora keyed her radio. "Beckett on site at S17, she said. "Unauthorized access. Expedite the unit." Static answered, thick, ugly, prolonged. No dispatcher voice, no confirmation, just the hiss of a channel being held open by something that didn't breathe. Trevor laughed softly, like the static was a joke. "You guys are acting like it's..." he started. Nora cut him off. "Trevor, back away from the cabinet, now. This isn't optional." Trevor's face hardened, defensive, like he was about to say something about contracts and council authorization. And then his phone lit brighter in his hand. He looked down. His expression softened instantly. Not happy, not relieved, attentive, like a dog hearing its owner's whistle. "What is it?" I asked, and hated how my voice almost sounded eager. Trevor didn't answer. He brought the phone closer. Then he said, quiet and awed, "It says we can prove it." Nora's eyes flashed. "Put the phone away." Trevor blinked. "But it's now," Nora repeated. Trevor's thumb twitched again, and I knew he wasn't going to call anyone. He was going to comply with the screen. I stepped just far enough forward to be heard, not enough to cross Nora's boundary. "Trevor," I said, steady, "look at me." He did, barely. I pointed at the kneeling contractor. "What's his name?" Trevor's brow furrowed, like the question was a puzzle. Eli. Eli's on his knees in front of an energized cabinet, I said. If this goes wrong, Eli gets hurt. Do you understand? Trevor's mouth tightened. For a heartbeat, he was back in his own head. Then Eli shifted. He leaned closer, an inch, maybe two. That was the most terrifying movement I'd seen all day, because it looked like a decision made without permission. Nora's grip on my wrist tightened. Don't, she whispered, as if she could feel my feet wanting to move too. Eli inhaled slowly. Then he spoke clearly, like he was reciting a line he'd practiced. It's under the test, he said. But if you give it a second run, it opens the rest. Trevor's face lit up. See? He hears it too. It's not just me. Nora's voice went cold. There will be no second run. Eli turned his head slightly, still kneeling, still too close. His eyes didn't focus on Nora's face. They looked past her, past us, toward empty air, like he was addressing something standing just behind our shoulders. It wants to be consistent, Eli said. It wants the ritual. How do you know that? I asked before I could stop myself. Nora shot me a look, warning, sharp. Eli smiled faintly, not cruel, not manic, assured. Because it already has a schedule, he said. The second tone swelled behind my eyes, and for a moment I smelled overheated plastic again, sweet and wrong. Nora lowered her voice into something that might bypass the compulsion. Eli, stand up. Step back. We're leaving. Eli didn't move. Trevor's phone chimed again. His gaze dipped like gravity had grabbed his eyelids. Nora moved. Fast, controlled. She snatched the phone out of Trevor's hand. Trevor jolted. Hey! Nora didn't even glance at the screen. She didn't argue. She didn't negotiate. She tried to kill it the simple way, thumb jabbing the power button. The screen went dark, then lit again by itself. That tiny defiance made my stomach drop. Nora's eyes hardened. She threw the phone into the grass hard, far enough that it skidded out of reach. The sound of plastic hitting dirt was stupidly normal. For one clean second, the second tone thinned. Trevor staggered back like he'd been slapped. What the hell is wrong with you? Nora's voice stayed cold. That phone isn't yours right now. It's a mouth. Trevor's anger faltered. Confusion replaced it. You... what? Back up, Nora repeated. Now. Trevor took a step without thinking, like losing the screen had loosened something in his mind. Eli didn't. Eli's gaze stayed locked on the cabinet like it was a doorway to an answer he'd been promised. He reached one hand inside, not grabbing wires, not yanking anything, just slipping his fingers in gently, like he was reaching toward warmth. Nora started forward, and the siren above us made a sound I'd only ever heard in maintenance bays. A relay click, a mechanical arming, the moment before a system commits. Trevor's head snapped up. Did you do that? Nora's face drained. No. The park's ambient noise dulled, road sound, birds, even the wind in the leaves, like someone had lowered the world's volume. Underneath it, the second tone sharpened into a thin, precise thread. Eli's shoulders relaxed, like the sound had finally found its key. Eli, I said, and my voice broke on the name. Get your hand out. He didn't look at me. He whispered, It's polite. It's waiting for permission. Nora's radio crackled again, this time with a single word forcing itself through the channel, warped but unmistakable. Closer. Nora's eyes widened. She made a decision. No arguing, no negotiating. She grabbed my wrist with both hands and yanked me backward, hard, away from the cabinet's line. Move, she barked. I stumbled, caught myself, and my gaze flicked, against my will, toward the cabinet's inner metal plate. In its dull surface, I saw us, Nora, me, Trevor, and behind Eli, just outside the reflection's edge, a silhouette like a person made of wrong angles, too tall for the space, standing as if it had always been there. My stomach dropped. Rule 6 screamed in my head, "Don't turn around." I didn't. I locked my eyes on Nora's face. She was pale, jaw clenched, pupils wide. She'd seen it too. Trevor backed away another step, suddenly breathing hard. What is that?" he whispered. Eli smiled, still kneeling, still reaching. Above us, the siren motor began to spin, not the full wail yet, but the ominous prelude. The moment before the county's voice becomes a command. Nora leaned close to my ear, voice shaking with controlled urgency. "If it activates," she whispered, "we don't listen. We run. We don't look back." My throat tightened. What about Eli? Nora's eyes flicked to the kneeling man, and something in her face cracked, just a hair. Then she said the hardest sentence I'd ever heard her say. "We can't save someone who's already answering." The motor spun faster, the air pressed heavier, and I realized the most terrifying part wasn't the siren about to scream. It was the fact that the siren walker wasn't forcing anything. It was offering a ritual. A handshake. And people, good, curious, ordinary people, were choosing to take it.